January 1943, the American submarine Wahoo sliced through the waters of the South Pacific, approaching the Vitiaz Strait off New Guinea. This was a maritime choke point patrolled by Japanese aircraft and anti-submarine vessels. The crew shared an edgy expectancy. They were on a war patrol to seek out the enemy, thousands of miles from a friendly port. Defeat meant death in an iron coffin in a nameless deep, but the mood aboard Wahoo was curiously confident. She was commanded by a new skipper, Lieutenant Commander Dudley Morton. He called the crew together and said quietly, "Wahoo is expendable. We will take every reasonable precaution, but our mission is to sink enemy shipping. We are going out to search for Japs. If it turns out to be the enemy, we are going to hunt him down and kill him." Not a single man asked for transfer. Wahoo's executive officer, Lieutenant Richard O'Kane, was a 31-year-old New Englander with light brown hair and a strong jaw. He had served under Morton's cautious predecessor, and the frustration had been sharp. Now, with Morton in command, O'Kane felt a fighting spirit infuse the boat. That spirit was tested immediately. Wahoo's orders included a reconnaissance of Wewak, a Japanese-held harbor on the north coast of New Guinea. The problem was that their charts showed only a ragged coastline. The name Wewak did not appear on their maps. The solution came from a motor machinist's mate who had purchased an Australian school atlas in Brisbane. A young officer, George Grider, used the atlas to project a working chart of the harbor. Morton decided Wahoo would enter Wewak and torpedo whatever they found. Wahoo crept into the enemy anchorage, guided by the school atlas. O'Kane manned the periscope, giving quiet bearings. At the end of the harbor, they identified their target not as a freighter, but as a Japanese destroyer, the Harusame. It got underway and charged directly at them. Morton had only 2 torpedoes left in the forward tubes. There was no time to bring the stern tubes to bear. The destroyer was coming straight down their throat. Morton said calmly, "That's all right. Keep your scope up and we'll shoot the son of a bitch down the throat." A desperate frontal shot at an oncoming warship. O'Kane pressed his eye to the periscope as the destroyer bore down, its bow wave a white V at 850 yards. He ordered the final torpedo fired. An explosion broke light bulbs and sent cork insulation flying. Then silence. The sound of steam belching from the destroyer's boilers crackled through the boat. O'Kane raised the periscope and said, "There she is, broken in 2. Wahoo escaped the shallow harbor and set course for her assigned patrol area in the Palau Islands. The crew was elated. They had sunk an enemy warship before even reaching their station, but Morton was just getting started. 2 days north of Wewak, lookouts spotted smoke on the horizon. Wahoo went to battle stations. The submarine was facing a convoy of 2 freighters, a troop transport, and a tanker. Morton and O'Kane coordinated the attack with precision. O'Kane spotted the targets through the periscope and fired spreads of torpedoes. One after another, the Japanese ships were hit. The transport, Buyo Maru, was packed with soldiers as it sank. Troops spilled into the water, some firing rifles at Wahoo's periscope. Morton took the submarine to the surface. On the surface, Wahoo found herself surrounded by 24 boats carrying the surviving soldiers from the sunken transport. Morton gave the order to man the deck guns. He told O'Kane, "I will prevent these soldiers from getting ashore. Everyone who does can mean an American life." "I have to do it." The crew opened fire on the boats. The 4-inch gun and machine guns raked the Japanese craft. Some crewmen reported the water was so thick with enemy soldiers that it was impossible to cruise through them without brushing them aside. Pharmacist mate Leslie Lindy treated 2 wounded sailors, amputating toes with boiled wire cutters. The action lasted about 15 minutes. When it was over, the boats were nothing but flotsam. The incident would be debated among submarine officers for years, but aboard Wahoo, the men believed Morton was defending the ship and doing his duty. Morton resumed the chase of the remaining ships. One freighter, the Pacific Maru, had been hit twice but still refused to sink. Its captain was a nervy devil, as Morton put it, firing deck guns at Wahoo's bridge. Morton was driven under by a mere freighter, which chagrined him. But he did not give up. In the dark, a searchlight beam suddenly illuminated the sky. The Japanese captain, seeing hope, stopped zigzagging and headed straight for the light. Morton recognized the trap and positioned Wahoo between the freighter and its rescue. He fired 2 stern torpedoes. 2 blasts rent the black waters. Morton yelled, "2 hits! 2 goddamn hits!" It had taken 4 hits from 3 separate attacks to sink the Pacific Maru. Every torpedo was expended. Morton gave the welcome command, "All ahead, standard, we're heading for the barn." Wahoo arrived at Pearl Harbor on February 7, 1943. The crew had lashed a broom to the attack periscope, a large Australian bristle used to sweep the Brisbane dock, signifying a clean sweep. A pennant carried the motto, "Shoot the sons of bitches." As Wahoo nosed into a slip, the submarine bass band played the Hawaiian war chant. Photographers captured Morton and O'Kane on the bridge under the broom. Admiral Charles Lockwood, Commander Submarines Pacific, was delighted. Wahoo had sunk a destroyer and 4 ships in a single short patrol. It was the most aggressive war patrol up until then. Morton was awarded the Navy Cross. O'Kane received the Silver Star. The crew was awarded the Presidential Unit Citation, a rare honor. The legend of Wahoo was born. The patrol electrified the submarine force. Morton and O'Kane had demonstrated tactics that broke the mold of cautious peacetime doctrine: daylight surface running, penetrating enemy harbors, down-the-throat shots, and relentless pursuit. Morton's patrol report included a separate section commending his officers and men, a first for the force of his executive officer. Morton wrote, "O'Kane is the fightingest naval officer I have ever seen and is worthy of the highest of praise and inspiration to the ship." The Morton-O'Kane team became the standard for submarine warfare. Wahoo had departed Brisbane a non-entity and returned a celebrity. The one-sub Wolfpack had shown the way, but the war was far from over, and Dick O'Kane's journey as a submariner was only beginning. On February 23, 1943, Wahoo departed Pearl Harbor for her 4th war patrol, heading for the Yellow Sea. Morton and O'Kane pushed the boat hard along the Chinese coast, hunting for targets. They found ships quickly and sent them down, freighters, a collier, a tanker, but the torpedoes began to betray them. A spread of 3 fish aimed at a valuable tanker produced 2 premature explosions, barely 18 seconds after they left the tubes. The 3rd ran wide. Morton and O'Kane watched another attack produce a dull thud as the warhead failed to detonate against a freighter's hull. By the time Wahoo cleared the Yellow Sea, the crew's elation had curdled into frustration. They had sunk multiple ships, but a trail of prematures, duds, and erratic runners had cost them far more. On the return voyage across the open Pacific, the weather turned savage. A full typhoon built with waves towering 60 feet or more. Lookouts lashed themselves to the shears as the boat pitched. A monster wave reared up astern and swept over the bridge, pouring into the main air induction opening. Seawater cascaded into the maneuvering room, shorting out electrical connections and triggering sputtering fires. Power failed. Wahoo wallowed without steerage, in danger of broaching. Morton and O'Kane donned smoke masks and entered the stricken compartment, dragging semi-conscious electricians to safety. The crew pumped water from the motor room and restarted a single engine. Wahoo stabilized and limped back to Pearl Harbor. After a brief refit, Wahoo departed Midway on April 25, 1943, for her 5th patrol, this time to the Kuril Islands. The patrol was plagued by further torpedo problems, premature explosions, duds, and erratic runs. The results were disappointing, with only 3 ships sunk and several damaged. The crew returned to Pearl frustrated. Morton's 6th patrol, departing San Francisco in July 1943, took Wahoo into the Sea of Japan. Once again, torpedo failures cost him dearly. He fired torpedo after torpedo at easy targets and watched them broach, run wide, or thud uselessly against enemy hulls. He came back empty-handed, his face dark with fury. Morton reported directly to Admiral Lockwood's office and delivered a blistering account of the torpedo failures. With multiple proven skippers reporting identical defects, the Vice Admiral made his decision. He ordered the magnetic exploder deactivated across the Pacific Fleet. The fight against the Japanese would now include a parallel fight against the Navy's own bureaucracy. Richard O'Kane was born in Dover, New Hampshire in February 1911, the son of a university professor. He entered Phillips Academy, then the Naval Academy, graduating in 1934. Service aboard a heavy cruiser and a destroyer taught him seamanship, but the cramped, independent world of submarines drew him. After submarine school, he joined the large submarine Argonaut and later became executive officer of Wahoo under Dudley Morton. That partnership had forged his combat instincts, but now he would command his own boat. In August 1943, the submarine Tang slid down the ways at Mare Island, and O'Kane took command. He immediately set his own stamp on the boat. He insisted on installing an ice cream maker and a proper baking oven, defying regulations to boost crew morale. Chief torpedoman William Ballinger secured the machines from a battleship. O'Kane's new executive officer, Murray Frazee, arrived from Greyback, and together they drilled the crew relentlessly. The captain believed constant training would be the difference between survival and death. During shakedown off San Diego, O'Kane decided to prove what Tang could endure. He took the boat past its test depth of 400 feet. A gauge line burst at 525 feet, and the sound head roller cracked. O'Kane kept descending past 600 feet, the depth gauge needle pinned at its limit. The hull groaned, but it held. He ordered the safety tank blown, and the boat slowly leveled off. Tang surfaced without major damage. The crew, though shaken, now trusted their skipper and their ship. October 1943. The USS Wahoo was heading home after a successful patrol in the Sea of Japan, having sunk a large transport and 3 other ships. Morton was determined to redeem his reputation after the torpedo failures of the previous run. But as Wahoo attempted to exit La Perouse Strait on the morning of October 11th, a Japanese artillery battery on the northern tip of Hokkaido spotted her on the surface. The battery opened fire, forcing Morton to crash dive. Wahoo was trailing oil. Whether she had struck a mine earlier or suffered damage from a circular torpedo run, no one could say for certain. Enemy planes converged and dropped bombs and depth charges. 3 anti-submarine vessels joined the hunt, dropping dozens of depth charges into the narrow strait. Diesel oil and bits of a submarine's propeller rose to the surface. The Wahoo was gone. Admiral Charles Lockwood received the news at Pearl Harbor with a heavy heart. He immediately closed the Sea of Japan as a patrol area. It just didn't seem possible that Morton and his fighting crew could be lost, Lockwood later wrote. The loss of Morton, the captain who had shaken off the shackles of caution and set the standard for aggressive submarine warfare, sent a shock through the entire submarine force. Morton posthumously received a 4th Navy Cross for the patrol, and his confirmed sinkings made him one of the top 3 scoring American sub-skippers of the war. But for the men who had served alongside him, no medal could fill the empty chair in the wardroom. At Pearl Harbor, Richard O'Kane received the confirmation that his mentor and the boat that had made his reputation were gone forever. He had last seen Wahoo at Mare Island, waved goodbye from the dock with the silver cigarette box the crew had given him still fresh in his pocket. Now that box felt heavier. 18 men who had made all 7 war patrols were entombed with Morton Forrest Sterling. The yeoman O'Kane had worked with so closely was alive only because Morton had released him at Midway at the last moment. But Chief Bill Carr was gone. Chief Keeter was gone. Paul Phillips, the cook who had confided his dread to Sterling, was gone. O'Kane stood on the pier and let the news settle into his bones. He did not dwell on grief. He turned it into fuel. O'Kane vowed to carry forward everything Morton had taught him: tenacity, aggression, and the refusal to break off an attack until the enemy was on the bottom. Tang was nearly ready for her first war patrol, and her crew was trained. O'Kane would not let Wahoo's example fade. He would avenge her the only way a submariner could, by sinking Japanese ships. The broom that had flown from Wahoo's periscope had signified a clean sweep. Now it signified a standard to live up to. O'Kane walked back aboard Tang, climbed the ladder to the conning tower, and began the final preparations for war. January 22, 1944, USS Tang slipped her moorings at the submarine base in Pearl Harbor and moved toward the channel entrance. Lieutenant Commander Richard O'Kane stood on the bridge watching the familiar landmarks slide past. He had spent months preparing this boat and her crew. Now the training was over. Tang was heading west on her first war patrol, and O'Kane carried the weight of everything Morton had taught him. Tang's first mission was not to sink ships, but to serve as a lifeguard for a Navy bomber strike on Wake Island. O'Kane positioned the boat 10 miles east of the atoll and used his searchlight as a beacon for the planes. To hide the glow from Japanese eyes on the island, a crewman fitted a circular wastebasket over the light, held in place with adhesive tape from the pharmacist's mate. The bombers found their mark and the strike went in without a loss. Released from the lifeguard duty, O'Kane set course for the Caroline Islands. The patrol area west of Truk was open ocean, and for 20 days Tang saw nothing. The crew grew restless. Tension built in the compartments. Then, on the night of February 16th, the radar operator reported a contact at 31,000 yards. A convoy was heading east toward Truk, and O'Kane ordered an intercept course. The hunt had begun. Closing on the surface, Tang's radar showed 2 large vessels and a smaller one, with escorts on each flank. O'Kane moved ahead of the convoy and submerged. At periscope depth, he watched the ships approach through the scope. The target was the Jyoten Maru, a 7,000-ton freighter packed with troops of the Japanese 52nd Imperial Division. O'Kane waited until the range was right. "Constant bearing mark," O'Kane said. The torpedo data computer returned a solution. He fired 4 torpedoes toward the freighter. 2 hit, a third struck. The Jyoten Maru broke apart and sank in minutes. 1,000 Japanese soldiers went down with her. It was Tang's first kill, and O'Kane had accomplished what every new submarine captain hopes for: a clean, decisive attack with no retaliation from the escorts. O'Kane ordered the boat deep to avoid any counterattack, but the depth charges that came were distant and inaccurate. The crew was jubilant. Every man aboard could now wear the submarine combat insignia. O'Kane allowed himself a moment of satisfaction, but he knew the patrol was far from over. Tang still had 19 torpedoes left, and he intended to use them. The next target appeared on the night of February 22nd. A large armed merchantman, the Fukuyama Maru, was steaming without escort near Agujan Island. O'Kane closed on the surface and fired 4 torpedoes. All 4 hit. The ship disintegrated, an escort gave chase, but Tang poured on speed and disappeared into a rain squall. O'Kane's tactics were already proving effective. Night surface attacks, radar-directed approaches, and aggressive pursuit. 2 days later, Tang caught a naval auxiliary, the Yamashimo Maru, carrying a load of munitions. The torpedo spread struck home, and the explosion was enormous. The shock wave rattled Tang from bow to stern. In the forward torpedo room, the number 5 tube door sprang a gasket under the pressure. Water began to trickle in. O'Kane did not know it yet, but that small leak would soon become a serious problem. On the morning of February 25th, Tang's lookout spotted a naval tanker, the Choco Maru, with a destroyer escort. O'Kane maneuvered ahead and submerged. The sea was glassy, and he dared only brief periscope exposures. At 600 yards, he fired 4 torpedoes. 4 hits. The tanker went down in 4 minutes, but the escort had spotted the periscope. The destroyer turned and began a sonar search, and O'Kane knew the easy part of the patrol was over. The destroyer dropped depth charges at long range, and O'Kane took Tang deep. He ordered the boat down past 400 feet. The torpedo tube leak was worsening. Water sprayed into the forward compartment. The bilge pumps struggled to keep up. O'Kane made a decision. He would use Tang's proven hull strength to go deeper still, to a depth no destroyer would expect a submarine to survive. Tang passed 500 feet. The depth gauge needle began to stick. At 600 feet, the needle hit the limit of the dial and stopped. The boat was still sinking. O'Kane scrambled down to the control room. He ordered the safety tank blown with a full charge of compressed air. For long minutes, nothing seemed to happen. Then the depth gauge fluttered and began to rise. Tang was under control again. The destroyer lingered overhead, pinging and searching. O'Kane ordered the pumps stopped to reduce noise. In the forward torpedo room, water continued to rise. Torpedomen stuffed batting into the leaking tube door to slow the flow. The destroyer stayed through the afternoon and into the evening. Finally, as darkness fell, the Japanese captain gave up and steamed away. O'Kane had won the duel. Tang surfaced, and the crew set to work replacing the gasket on the damaged tube. Tang returned to Midway Atoll on March 3, 1944, with 5 enemy ships sunk and more than 30,000 tons of Japanese shipping destroyed. It was the most successful first patrol ever conducted by an American submarine. O'Kane was awarded the Navy Cross. He had not forgotten Mush Morton. He had carried forward everything Morton taught him, and he had proven that the lessons of Wahoo would live on in the steel and discipline of Tang. O'Kane would go on to become the most successful submarine commander in American history. But on that day at Midway, standing on the bridge of his boat with the crew grinning up at him, he was simply a skipper who had done his job. He had taken a new submarine and a green crew into enemy waters, and brought them back with a record that would stand for the rest of the war. Murray Frazee served as Tang's executive officer through all her patrols before leaving the Navy after the war. George Grider survived the loss of his Wahoo shipmates and later commanded the submarine Hawkbill through successful patrols, eventually writing a memoir of his service. Forrest Sterling, released from Wahoo at Midway hours before her final sailing, authored the classic account Wahoo and carried the memory of his fallen crewmates for the rest of his life. Chief torpedoman William Ballinger transferred off Tang before her final patrol and survived the conflict. Admiral Charles Lockwood remained Commander Submarines Pacific through the end of the war, retiring as a vice admiral, the father of the Silent Service. The Silent Service had found another legend,